The academy dining hall was always full of voices, laughter, and the sound of metal trays sliding against the tables. Cadets from across the galaxy gathered there every evening after long hours of training. There were reptilian warriors with their deep growls, tall crystalline beings whose bodies sparkled under the lights, and soft-furred mammalians who always sat together in packs. Every group had its place. Every cadet had their circle, except Sira Kell. She was from the insectoid, race called the Kalari. Her people were known for strict order and pride in strength. Among them, only the largest and strongest earned respect. Sira was different. She was smaller, thinner, and her voice was softer than the rest. Back home, that had made her a shadow. Here at the academy, nothing had changed. Whenever she entered the dining hall, conversations grew quieter, and she noticed the glances. Sometimes they were sharp, sometimes mocking, but always clear. She was not welcome. She carried her tray with her long, thin arms and searched for an empty seat. The rule was unspoken, but everyone followed it. No one sat beside her, so she sat alone. Day after day, Sira chose the same corner. She lowered her eyes to her food and ate slowly, pretending not to notice the groups forming all around her. She told herself she didn't care, but deep inside, the silence pressed against her heart. She could hear the laughter of the others, but her own table remained quiet. One evening, the hall was unusually busy. The academy had finished a difficult round of flight simulations, and cadets were eager to celebrate. The tables filled quickly. Sira walked in, holding her tray close to her chest. Once again, she saw no place waiting for her. She moved to her usual corner. Her hands trembled slightly as she placed her tray down. Across the hall, the doors opened again. A human walked in. Humans were new to the Alliance, and they were often underestimated. Many older species thought of them as reckless or strange. But in the academy, whispers about human pilots had already begun. Some said they were brave to the point of foolishness. Others said they were unpredictable in ways no simulation could measure. The human who entered was Commander Elias Kane. He was older than most cadets, already carrying the marks of experience. His flight uniform was simple, but his presence made heads turn. He moved with quiet confidence, not rushing, not hesitating. His eyes scanned the room, but he showed no sign of searching for approval. He collected his tray and looked across the hall. Dozens of seats were open among groups who would have gladly welcomed him. Yet he did not walk toward them. Instead, he crossed the room in steady steps. Sira froze. She realized he was heading straight for her table. Her first thought was that he must be looking past her, that maybe someone else was nearby. Her second thought was that it was some kind of mistake. But no. Elias stopped at her table. Without asking, without speaking a word, he placed his tray down and sat beside her. The hall grew quieter. Cadets lifted their heads. Some exchanged confused glances. Others frowned, as if the human had broken a rule that no one had spoken, but everyone had followed. No one sat beside Sira Kell. Everyone knew that, except the human. Sira's hands shook so much that she nearly dropped her utensil. She dared to look at him from the corner of her eyes. Elias was calm, focused only on his food. He ate without hurry, as though nothing unusual was happening. For a long moment, Sira didn't know what to do. Should she thank him? Should she ask why? The words sat heavy on her tongue, but she couldn't speak them. She lowered her gaze again, but the silence between them was different from the silence she had known before. It wasn't cold or empty. It was steady, almost, warm. Then, something unexpected happened. Elias slid part of his rations across the tray, closer to her. It was a small piece of bread, simple but fresh. He didn't look at her when he did it. He didn't make a speech, didn't offer comfort. He just shared. Sira stared at it. Among her people, sharing food was rare, a sign of unusual trust. She hesitated, then slowly picked it up. Her chest felt tight. She wanted to ask him why, but when she looked at his face, she found no answer waiting there, only calm acceptance. The room around them filled again with sound, though not quite the same as before. Whispers spread. Some cadets laughed nervously, others looked uneasy, and a few seemed thoughtful. But no one interrupted them. For the rest of the meal, they ate in silence. Yet to Sira, it was not the lonely silence she had known for so long. It was different. For the first time since she had arrived at the academy, she did not feel invisible. When she finished her food, she placed her tray down gently and let out a slow breath. Elias stood, collected his tray, and left the hall without a word. Sira remained seated. She touched the empty space where he had been sitting. It was such a small thing, so simple, just a human pilot choosing a seat. But to her, it was the beginning of something she could not yet name. That night, when she returned to her quarters, she replayed the moment again and again. She wondered why a human, of all beings, had chosen her table. She had no answer, but the memory of it gave her strength, and for the first time since she had joined the academy, Sira felt a spark of hope. The next morning, Sirakel walked into the flight hall with her usual slow steps. The giant room smelled faintly of engine fuel and polished steel. Rows of training simulators lined the sides, each one humming with quiet power. Cadets were all ready, gathering in their groups, their voices rising with excitement. Normally, Sira entered quietly, keeping her head low so no one would notice her. She expected today to be the same, but when she stepped through the doors, she felt eyes turning toward her. At first, she thought she had done something wrong. She checked her uniform, her flight badge, even her wings that folded neatly against her back. Nothing was out of place. Still, she heard whispers ripple through the hall. "Is that the one the human sat with?" a reptilian cadet muttered. "Yes, I saw it. He gave her food, too," another voice replied. Sira's heart pounded. She wanted to hide, but there was no place to go. Everyone had seen. Everyone knew. The night before, she had told herself the moment at dinner was nothing, a mistake. Perhaps Elias Kane had simply chosen the first empty seat he saw. Perhaps he hadn't even noticed her. But the way the other cadets now stared at her told a different story. They believed it meant something. And maybe, deep inside, so did she. The training officer barked orders, calling the cadets into groups for the morning simulation. Today's exercise was a team flight through asteroid fields. Each squad would control a virtual ship, testing their ability to work together and survive. Sira moved toward the back, as she always did. Normally, no squad leader picked her. She would end up filling whatever empty role was left, often as a silent observer while others took control. But before the officer could assign her, a voice spoke. "I'll take her," Elias Kane said. The hall went silent. Sira's wings stiffened. She turned slowly to look. The human stood with his arms crossed, calm as always. He didn't smile. He didn't raise his voice. He simply said it like it was the most natural thing in the world. The officer frowned but nodded. "Very well, Commander. She's on your squad." Sira's steps felt heavy as she walked toward him. Every eye in the room followed her. She wanted to vanish, but Elias gave her a small nod, as though it were already decided and nothing was strange about it. Inside the simulator, the screens lit up with the stars of a false sky. The squad gathered at their consoles. Elias took the captain's chair, hands resting lightly on the controls. Sira sat near the back, uncertain of her place. The mission began. Asteroids drifted across their path, some small as stones, others larger than ships. Virtual alarms buzzed, warning of incoming collisions. "Forward shields up," Elias ordered, his voice steady. The squad moved quickly. Each cadet handled their role with skill, though Sira noticed gaps in their timing, small, delays, missed details. She had studied flight patterns late at night, when no one else bothered. Her mind caught things others often ignored. At first, she said nothing. She was used to being silent. But when she saw the ship's power system blinking in warning, her breath caught. The shields were drawing too much energy. Soon the engines would fail. She looked around. No one else noticed. Her hands shook as she reached for her console. "Commander, the power lines. They need rerouting through the secondary grid, or the shields will collapse." The words escaped before she could. "Stop them!" Her voice was soft, uncertain. She expected Elias to ignore her, like others always had. But he didn't. He looked at her instantly. His eyes sharpened. "Show me." Sira blinked, surprised. With trembling fingers, she tapped the sequence. The energy rerouted, the blinking. Warning light faded, and the ship steadied. Elias gave a short nod. "Good work." The words hit her harder than she expected. Her chest tightened, her wings trembled. Good work. No one had ever said that to her before. The rest of the squad stared at her. A reptilian cadet muttered, "I didn't even see that." Elias ignored him. "Asteroids ahead. Helm. Adjust course. Sira, monitor the grids." She obeyed, her confidence growing with every second. When the squad successfully cleared the field and completed the mission, the officer's voice rang out over the speakers. Squad Kane. Success. 0 critical damage. Excellent coordination. For the first time in her life, Sira felt like part of something greater. When they stepped out of the simulator, she expected the whispers to return. They did, but not with the same edge as before. Some cadets looked at her with suspicion, but others with curiosity. A crystalline being even muttered, "She saved that run." Elias, as always, said nothing. He walked past the others without explanation, heading toward the exit. But before he left, he stopped near Sira and placed one hand briefly on her shoulder. It was light, just a touch, but steady. Then he walked away. The gesture spoke louder than any words. That evening, Sira sat again in the dining hall. As usual, her table was empty. She half expected Elias to ignore her this time, to let the morning be forgotten. But once again, he entered the hall, collected his tray, and walked toward her table. Without hesitation, he sat beside her. No words, no explanations. Around them, cadets stared. Some shook their heads, some laughed, but others simply watched, as though something was shifting they did not understand. Sira dared to look at him. "Why?" she whispered, though her voice was almost too soft to hear. Elias didn't answer. He simply continued eating, calm as always. And somehow, that silence told her everything. He didn't sit there because of rules. He didn't sit there because of pity. He sat there because to him, she belonged. For the first time since she had come to the academy, Sira felt her chest lighten. The loneliness that had weighed on her for so long began to crack. Perhaps humans were strange. Perhaps they broke unspoken rules. But maybe, just maybe, that was their strength. The Academy's training schedule grew harder with every passing week. Each day brought new challenges, flight maneuvers, tactical drills, and long lectures about the rules of war in space. For most cadets, the pressure was heavy but manageable, because they had groups, friends, or whole squads that supported one another. Sira Kell, however, still walked alone. Yes, some cadets whispered less now. A few even glanced at her with a trace of respect after the asteroid simulation. But old habits ran deep. At meals, no one else sat with her except Elias Kane. In the halls, groups still parted around her. And when new assignments were given, most cadets quickly avoided her, afraid of being slowed down. Still, Something inside her had changed. Every time she remembered Elias's calm nod, his words, "Good work," and the steady way he trusted her at the console, a spark lit inside her.
Chest.
It was small, but strong. One morning, the officer announced a new kind of test. "Today," he said in a stern voice, "you will face a live combat simulation. Your squad will be assigned a starship with full systems. You must work together to defeat an enemy scenario, fail, and you will lose points toward your ranking." The room buzzed with energy. Live combat simulations were considered one of the hardest stages of training. They were not real battles, but the starships used real systems. Navigation, shields, weapons, all under Academy control. For many cadets, this was the closest they had ever been to commanding a true vessel. Sierra felt her wings twitch nervously. She knew what this meant. A squad without trust would break apart quickly. And in such missions, no one ever wanted her in their squad. Her fear was confirmed moments later. Squad leaders began forming teams. One by one, cadets were chosen. Names echoed across the hall, excitement filling the air. And once again, Sierra stood alone. The officer frowned. "We have one unassigned cadet." Before he could continue, Elias Kane spoke. "She's with me." The words came as calmly as ever. No hesitation, no pause, as if it were the most natural choice. Some cadets groaned. A reptilian muttered, "He'll drag his score down with her." But Elias didn't even turn his head. He simply motioned for Sierra to follow. She obeyed, her heart pounding. The squad entered their assigned simulation chamber. Inside was a small, but fully equipped training starship. The walls hummed with power, and the consoles glowed with bright lights. To Sierra, the room felt enormous, like stepping into a real vessel bound for the stars. Elias stood at the captain's chair. "Positions," he said simply. Each cadet hurried to their stations. Navigation, weapons, engineering. Sierra hesitated, unsure where to go. "You're on power management," Elias said, glancing at her. Her throat tightened. Power management was critical. A mistake could drain the engines, leave shields useless, or shut down weapons at the worst moment. Why would he give her such a role? But she nodded and sat at the console. The simulation began. On the screen ahead, a false star field stretched into the distance. A warning alarm sounded, and red lights flashed across the panels. "Enemy contact," one cadet reported. "3 fighters inbound." "Shields up," Elias ordered. "Forward weapons online." The ship rumbled as simulated fire struck them. Sierra quickly checked the energy flows. The shields drew too much power, slowing the recharge of the weapons. Her hands hovered over the controls. Should she speak? Should she act? She remembered the last time, how Elias had trusted her to reroute the grids. Slowly, carefully, she adjusted the balance. The shields dimmed slightly, but the weapons roared with greater strength. "Direct hit!" the weapons officer shouted. "1 fighter down!" Sierra let out a shaky breath, but the fight was not over. The 2 remaining fighters circled fast, their attacks coming from different sides. Energy readings spiked wildly. If she strengthened shields on one side, the other grew weaker. It was impossible to cover everything at once. Panic fluttered in her chest. She could hear cadets shouting, alarms blaring, the ship trembling with every impact. Her claws tapped nervously on the console. Then Elias's voice cut through the noise. "Calm! Steady! Sierra, your call!" Her breath caught. He was giving her the choice. In front of the whole squad. She swallowed hard, studied the patterns, and made her decision. She rerouted power sharply to the starboard shields, leaving the port side weaker. The squad gasped. A second later, one of the fighters fired at the starboard side. The strengthened shields absorbed the blow. The enemy circled wide, exposing its back to the weapons array. "Fire!" Elias commanded. A blast of energy struck the fighter, destroying it instantly. Cheers erupted around the ship. The last enemy turned to flee. With renewed confidence, the squad chased it down and destroyed it. Moments later, the simulation ended. The ship lights dimmed and the officer's voice echoed through the chamber. Squad Kane. Mission success. Excellent tactical adjustment. The cadets cheered again, high with energy. But this time, their eyes turned toward Sira. When they stepped out of the chamber, whispers followed them. But they were not the cruel whispers she had once known. That adjustment saved us. She rerouted the power perfectly. Maybe the human was right about her. Sira's wings trembled with nervous pride. For the first time, her actions had been undeniable. No one could pretend she had not helped. Yet when she looked toward Elias, she found no prideful smile or loud praise. He simply gave her a quiet nod, the same as before. His calm eyes seemed to say, "I trusted you. You proved it." It was a silent understanding between them. That evening, as always, Elias sat beside her in the dining hall. But this time something was different. Sierra noticed another cadet glance at her table, hesitate, and almost approach before turning back. It was small, but it was a change. The unspoken rule that had always isolated her was starting to crack. She looked at Elias, who ate without speaking, and whispered softly, "Thank you." He did not answer with words. He only glanced at her once, his expression steady, and continued, eating. But to Syrah, that silence carried more weight than any speech. It was trust. It was respect. It was something she had never known before, and it gave her strength for whatever test would come next. Weeks passed at the academy, and the cadets grew stronger with every drill. They learned how to fly in formation, how to balance energy systems, and how to make quick choices under pressure. For Sirakel, each day was still difficult, but she was no longer the same lonely figure she had once been. She still sat alone, but not completely. Elias Kane was always beside her, silent as ever, yet steady. His presence made the whispers softer, made the stares less sharp. And slowly, the way other cadets looked at her began to shift. Some no longer laughed. A few even asked small questions during training, but peace in the academy never lasted long. One morning, alarms echoed through the entire station. The usual calm of the academy shattered as red lights flashed across the halls. Cadets rushed out of their quarters, confusion and fear spreading quickly. "What is happening?" a crystalline cadet asked, their voice ringing like glass. Before anyone could answer, the loudspeakers roared with the command officer's voice. "This is not a drill. Unknown ships have breached our outer defenses. All cadets report to the hangar immediately." Syrah froze. Her mind spun. This was impossible. The academy was deep inside Alliance space, far from the front lines. Who would dare attack a training station? Elias appeared through the crowd, his steps quick but calm. He looked at Syrah, then motioned for her to follow. She obeyed without question. The hangar was a storm of noise and motion. Engines roared as fighters powered up. Officers shouted orders over the chaos. Cadets scrambled to their assigned vessels, many pale with fear. "This can't be real," one murmured. "They wouldn't send us out against a real enemy." But the sight on the main display proved otherwise. Dozens of dark, angular ships surrounded the station, firing beams of energy that cracked against the Academy's shields. Real explosions lit up the void beyond. The Academy was under true attack. Syrah's heart pounded so hard she could hardly breathe. She was just a cadet, untested, unready. All her life, she had been told she was weak, useless. And now she was supposed to face this? But then she felt Elias's hand on her shoulder. She looked up. His face was calm, steady, as though he had expected this all along. His eyes met hers, and without speaking, he gave a small nod. The silent message was clear. "You are ready. Come with me." They reached a fighter. It was sleek, built for speed and precision with 2 seats, pilot and co-pilot. Other cadets rushed to larger crafts in groups, but Elias pointed at the fighter. "You," he said simply, motioning to the co-pilot seat. Sira froze. "Me?" "Now." His tone left no room for doubt. Her wings trembled. Every instinct told her to run, to let someone else take the seat. But his trust pulled her forward. Without another word, she climbed into the fighter. The console lit up under her claws. Elias strapped into the pilot's seat. The engines roared to life and the fighter lifted from the hangar floor. Outside, the battle was chaos. Academy ships, still crewed by half-trained cadets, darted and weaved against the dark enemy vessels. Explosions flared. Shield flares painted, the stars with blue light. Elias gripped the controls, his movements sharp and precise. The fighter spun into formation, diving straight into the battle. "Shields active," Sira reported, her voice shaking. "Good," Elias said. "Watch the energy. Tell me before we burn out." Another fighter streaked past them, chased by enemy. Fire. Elias swerved, cutting in between, and their cannons roared. A blast tore into the enemy ship, sending it spiraling into debris. Sira's breath caught. This wasn't a simulation. This was real. Lives were ending out there. Friends, cadets, enemies. Her console beeped urgently. "Commander, forward shields at 60%, energy bleed on the left wing." "Reroute it." She hesitated. "But—" "Trust yourself," Elias said. His tone was calm, unshaken even as fire rained around them. Her claws tapped furiously. She redirected power, shutting down a secondary system to save the shields. The ship steadied. "Good," Elias said. The single word filled her with strength. The battle dragged on. Cadets panicked over the comms, voices filled with fear. Some ships broke formation, making mistakes that cost them dearly. But Elias's fighter moved with quiet certainty, weaving through enemy fire like a blade through water. And always, he asked for her voice. "Sira, adjust weapons. Sira, call the target. Sira, your choice, left or right flank." Each time, her heart shook, but she answered, and each time, her choice made a difference. Slowly, she stopped hearing the whispers of doubt inside her mind. Instead, she heard his voice, steady and clear, guiding but never doubting. At last, the Academy fleet regrouped. Together, they pushed against the enemy lines. But then, a terrible sight filled the main display. At the center of the enemy formation floated a massive vessel, larger than all the others combined. Dark energy pulsed from it, feeding power to the smaller ships. Every blast that struck it bounced harmlessly off its shields. "The command ship," Sira whispered. Elias's eyes narrowed. "If we take that out, the others will fall." "But how?" she asked. "Its shields are too strong." "Look closer," he said. She studied the readings. At first, she saw nothing. The shields looked perfect, unbreakable. But then her mind remembered something. A small detail from late-night studies, when she pored over shield patterns alone. "The pulses," she said suddenly. "The shields blink for a fraction of a second every time the energy resets. That's the gap!" Elias's lips tightened into the smallest hint of a smile. "Then that's where we strike." They dove toward the command ship. Enemy fighters swarmed, but Elias twisted the controls with impossible precision, dodging every blast. Sira's claws danced over the console, balancing power, strengthening shields just long enough to survive each attack. The massive ship loomed. Before them, dark energy flaring. The shield pulsed once, twice, then blinked for a fraction of a second. "Now!" Sira shouted. Elias fired. The cannons struck the ship at the exact moment the shield flickered. A blast of light tore through the vessel, punching deep into its core. For one heartbeat, the battlefield froze. Then the command ship erupted in fire. The enemy fleet broke apart, their formations collapsing without central command. The Academy ships cheered over the comms. Victory was theirs. When the fighter landed back in the hangar, Sira sat frozen in her seat, her claws still trembling over the console. Her chest rose and fell quickly, but her heart was burning with something new. Pride. She had done it. She had faced the impossible, and when she looked at Elias, he met her gaze with calm eyes. He gave the smallest nod, just as he always did. No grand speech, no loud praise, but she understood. He trusted her, and together, they had won. The destruction of the enemy command ship should have ended the battle. For a moment, it seemed it had. Enemy fighters scattered, their formations broken. Cadets cheered over the comms, voices rising with hope. But hope lasted only seconds. From the darkness beyond, more ships appeared. Sleek, black, and heavier than before, they poured into the system like a flood. These were not scouts or training raiders. This was a fleet prepared for war. The Academy's shields were already weakened, its hangars damaged. The instructors and defense crews fought bravely, but they were outnumbered. And the cadets, young and untested, were all that stood between. The Academy and destruction. Sirakel felt her chest tighten as the warning alarms screamed again. She looked at Elias Kane, who sat steady in the pilot's seat beside her. His face showed no fear, only focus. "We fight," he said calmly, adjusting the controls. Sira's claws shook, but she placed them firmly on her console. "Then we fight." The enemy fleet moved in waves. Their fire rained down, shaking the Academy's shields. Fighters filled the void, circling like predators. The comms filled with fear. "They're too many. We can't hold them back. We're just cadets." Sira felt the panic pulling at her. The voices reminded her of her own doubts, the whispers she had carried for so long, that she was weak, unwanted, unworthy. But then Elias's voice cut through the storm. "Calm, steady, stay in formation, breathe, focus." Something about his tone, so certain, spread through the comms. The panicked voices grew quiet. Cadets steadied their ships. For the first time, they sounded like a fleet. The battle raged. Elias's fighters spun through enemy lines, striking hard and vanishing before they could react. Sira's mind raced at the console, adjusting shields, rerouting power, giving their ship the edge it needed to survive. Every decision mattered. Every second was a knife's edge. "Sira, weapons low," Elias warned. She glanced at the readings. Energy reserves were collapsing. The shields drank too much and weapons could fail at any moment. She forced herself to breathe, then cut power from non-essential systems, lights, auxiliary scanners, even cooling units. She threw everything into weapons and shields. "Done," she said firmly. Elias fired. Their cannons tore through another enemy ship. Her chest swelled. She had chosen right, but the Academy itself was failing. Enemy fire slammed into its shields again and again. Explosions lit the station's surface. Sira watched in horror as entire sections went dark. "If the shields fail," she whispered. Elias finished her thought. "The station falls." His eyes narrowed. "Then we buy them time." He dove toward the thickest wave of enemy ships. Sira's claws clenched the console. Fear screamed inside her, but she followed. His lead, balancing every drop of power to keep them alive. Their fighter twisted and darted, weaving between ships. Beams of fire streaked past, some grazing their shields, others missing by breaths. They destroyed one enemy, then another, but the numbers kept growing. Her heart pounded. Sweat dampened her carapace. But Elias never wavered. Across the comms, cadets began to rally. "Squad Kane, lead us!" "We'll follow the human. Hold the line!" One by one, fighters joined Elias's formation. Soon, dozens of cadet ships formed up behind him. Together, they struck like a spear, piercing into the enemy ranks. Sira felt it. Unity. For once, she wasn't the outsider. She was part of something greater. a fleet, moving as one. And at the center was Elias Kane, silent but unshakable. The enemy realized the danger. Their largest cruiser shifted, turning its massive cannons toward the Academy's heart. One direct hit would shatter the station. Syra saw the readings and gasped. "They're targeting the main reactor. If it's destroyed, the whole Academy will—" "I see it," Elias said. His voice was calm, but his eyes were sharp. "We stop them." "But how? That cruiser's shields are too strong." Elias looked at her. Just one glance, but it was enough. He trusted her to find the answer. Syra's mind raced. Her claws flew across the console, pulling up energy readings. The cruiser's shields were thick, too thick for direct fire. But she noticed a rhythm in their pulses, much like the command ship before. Strong, steady, except for one fraction of a second when the shield cycled. "There!" she shouted. "The starboard arc! Every 22 seconds, it drops for just a breath!" Elias gave the faintest nod. "Then that's where we strike." He pulled the fighter into a sharp dive. Cadet ships followed, weaving through enemy. Fire. The cruiser loomed larger and larger, its cannons glowing with deadly power. Syra counted the pulses, her heart hammering. 20, 21. The shield shimmered. "Now!" she cried. Elias fired. The cadets fired with him. Dozens of beams struck the cruiser at the exact moment the shield blinked. The blast tore through, punching deep into its core. For one terrible second, the ship held. Then it exploded in a wave of fire and debris. The cadets cheered, their voices filling the comms with triumph. But Syra barely breathed. Her claws trembled as she realized they had done it. She had done it. The enemy fleet faltered. Without their cruiser, their formation broke. The Academy's defenses rallied, striking back with renewed strength. One by one, the dark ships fled. Into the void, vanishing as quickly as they had come. The battle was over. The hangar was filled with cheers when the fighters returned. Cadets climbed from their ships, shouting, laughing, embracing. For many, it was their first real battle, and they had survived. But Syra stood silently, her body still trembling with exhaustion. Then she saw Elias. He stepped from the fighter, calm as ever, his uniform scorched, but his posture steady. Their eyes met. He gave her the smallest nod, the same as always. No long speech, no loud praise, just trust, just acknowledgement. But that was enough. For the first time, other cadets looked at her differently. Not with pity, not with mockery, with respect. Some even approached, clapping her on the back, thanking her for the shield readings, for the call that saved the Academy. Syra lowered her head, overwhelmed. She had never imagined this moment, and yet it was real. That night, in the dining hall, she carried her tray as she always did. But this time, the silence felt different. Some cadets gestured for her to sit with them. Others nodded respectfully. Still, she walked to her usual corner. Elias was already there, sitting with his tray, waiting. She sat beside him, and for a while, they ate in silence. Around them, the hall buzzed with voices, but at their table, calm reigned. At last, Syra whispered, "We won today." Elias didn't look up. He only gave a small nod, his eyes steady. And in that silence, Syra understood. It was not just victory, it was belonging. The Academy was quiet in the days after the battle. Repairs stretched across every hangar and corridor. Engineers patched broken hulls, medics tended to the wounded, and cadets carried equipment through smoke-stained halls. But beneath the scars, something had changed. Where once there had been doubt, there was now pride. The cadets had fought, they had won. And at the heart of it all were two figures who could not be ignored, Sirakel and the human pilot, Elias Kane. Recognition. The head instructors gathered the cadets in the central hall. The banners of the Academy, scorched but still standing, hung above them. An instructor, her voice firm but heavy with exhaustion, addressed the crowd. You stood when all seemed lost. You fought when fear told you to flee. And because of you, this academy still stands. The hall erupted in cheers. Sira shifted uneasily among the crowd. She had never stood in front before. She had always hidden in corners, hoping no one would notice her. But now eyes turned toward her, filled with gratitude. The instructor raised a hand for silence. Cadet Sira Kell, Cadet Elias Kane, step forward. Sira froze. Her claws twitched nervously. But Elias moved without hesitation, walking calmly to the front. After a heartbeat, Sira forced her legs to follow. The instructor looked at them both. You two showed courage and unity. You reminded us that even cadets can carry the spirit of true defenders. She paused, then declared, From this day, you are no longer just cadets. You are guardians of this academy. The hall shook with applause. Cadets stamped their feet, voices rising in a chant. Sira's name echoed alongside Elias's, something she had never imagined in her quietest dreams. Her chest tightened, but this time it was not with fear. It was with pride. A new place. That evening, the dining hall was different. No longer did Sira walk alone with her tray. Dozens of cadets called her over, offering seats, sharing food, telling stories of the battle. She smiled awkwardly, unused to so many voices. But though she was grateful, her feet carried her to the same corner she had always chosen. And there, as always, Elias sat waiting. No one questioned it. It was as if the corner had always belonged to them both. Sira sat down, her movements still, shy, and Elias slid half his bread toward her without a word. She accepted it with a quiet nod. For a long moment, they ate in silence, while laughter and chatter filled the hall. Sira finally whispered, They don't look at me the same anymore. Elias chewed his bread and said softly, Because you're not the same anymore. Her eyes widened. She wanted to deny it, but deep inside she knew it was true. She was no longer the cadet who sat alone, believing she was invisible. She was someone who had faced the void and survived. Someone who had mattered. The Human's Way, in the weeks that followed, the academy slowly returned to order. Classes resumed. Training drills grew sharper, but whispers of the battle remained, traveling through every corridor. Cadets told tales of Elias's calm commands and Sira's quick thinking. Some exaggerated, turning them into legends already. Others simply spoke of how a human and an outcast had led them all to victory. Sira began to notice something else, too. Other cadets now sought her out, not just for praise, but for advice. They asked her about shield patterns, about tactics, about how she had spotted the weakness in the cruiser. Each time she answered carefully. At first, she worried she would say the wrong thing, but Elias's steady presence at her side gave her courage. She spoke, and they listened. And slowly she realized something she had never considered. She was becoming a leader. The Academies. Decision one morning, the Academy Council summoned Elias and Sira. They entered the council chamber, its walls lined with glowing stars projected from ancient maps. The senior commanders stood in a half-circle, their expressions solemn. The lead commander spoke. The enemy you faced was only a fragment of a larger threat. They will return, stronger, more prepared. The galaxy will need defenders ready for them. Elias listened quietly. Sira felt a shiver down her spine. The commander continued. Your actions proved that courage and unity can come from anywhere, even from those others overlook. Because of this, we are creating a new program, a program that will train cadets not only to fight, but to lead with that same courage. He looked directly at Elias and Sira. And you two will guide it. Sira gasped softly. Guide it? Her? She was still learning, still uncertain, but when she glanced at Elias, his expression was calm, steady, unshaken. That calmness was like an anchor. If he believed they could do this, then maybe she could too. The quiet moment. That night, after the council's words, Sira found herself on the academy's outer balcony. The stars stretched endless above her, bright and silent. She leaned against the railing, her claws curled tightly. Footsteps sounded behind her. She turned to see Elias, carrying 2 cups of warm liquid from the mess hall. He handed her one and leaned against the rail beside her. For a long while they stood together, drinking in silence. The stars burned steady in the void. Finally, Sira whispered, "I used to think I would always be alone, that no one would sit beside me." Elias didn't answer at once. He just looked at the stars, calm as ever. Then he said quietly, "You're not alone anymore." Her throat tightened. She lowered her eyes, clutching the cup. She wanted to speak, to thank him, to tell him what his presence meant. But no words seemed enough. So instead, she stayed silent. And beside her, so did he. Legacy in time. The academy rebuilt stronger than before. The scars of battle remained, but they became reminders of survival, not defeat. Sira Kell, once the quiet cadet no one noticed, now stood at the front of training halls guiding younger recruits. She taught them not only about shields and energy, flows, but about courage, the kind that rises when you believe in yourself and in those beside you. Elias Kane remained as he always was, calm, steady, silent. He did not seek praise, yet cadets followed him with absolute trust. His silence spoke louder than words, reminding all who saw him that leadership was not noise, but presence. Together they became symbols of the academy, stories of the human, who sat beside the lonely cadet, spread far beyond its walls, reaching distant colonies and fleets. And across the galaxy, when recruits felt fear, some whispered the same line for courage. No one sat beside her, until the human pilot did without a word.